So, begin to know yourself as something far greater than the ever-changing, ever-dying aspects that have dominated your picture of who you are. Who am I is then answered with, I am an infinite being who originated not from my parents, but from a source that is itself birthless, deathless, and changeless. Your connection to Source. We have all been created from the same source, and it is my conclusion that we must be like what we came from. It matters not what we call this source. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, is the message in the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching. Call it Tao, call it God, call it Jehovah, call it Divine Mind, it matters not. You are merely interested in recognizing that you originated from the source of all life in a form you know as your constantly changing physical body, which obviously contains the creative energy that you came from. Listen to these words, recorded during a 1967 lecture given by an initiatic science master, Omram Mikhail Ivanov of Bulgaria. Quote, "The Creator has planted within every creature a fragment of himself, a spark, a spirit of the same nature as himself, and thanks to this spirit, every creature can become a creator. And this means that instead of always waiting for their needs to be satisfied by some external source, human beings can work inwardly by means of their thought, their will, and their spirit to obtain the nourishing, healing elements they need. This is why the teaching I bring you is of the spirit, of the Creator, and not of matter." Unquote. I love this quote because it speaks to a part of you that has been largely ignored throughout all of your educational pursuits and accomplishments. The key words here are a fragment of himself, a spark that lies within you, but has largely been left unexamined. This is a great image for you to begin to understand the greatness of your higher self. There is a spark of God within you that is the invisibleness I've been alluding to. It is that which you cannot grasp with the senses. It beats your heart, it grows your hair, and it keeps your lungs breathing in and out. You've become accustomed to taking it for granted while putting the major focus of your life on the physical, that is the unreal part of you. My objective in this chapter and the next is to inspire you to recognize that a spark, a tiny fragment of the creative source of the universe, is located within you, and to help you increase the power of that spark so it becomes the primary force in your everyday life. Review the first chapter and affirm your willingness to change your concept of yourself to help you recognize and increase that spark. Then dedicate yourself to exploring this higher self that I'm talking about. Your higher self is that spark, but a spark is an infinitesimal portion of your physical being. If you weigh, say, 150 pounds, that spark weighs maybe 1/100th of an ounce or 1/1,000,000th of an ounce. This is only a symbolic image because the spark is unchanging. But I'm encouraging you to conceptualize that spark of God inside of you. Imagine it growing to double its size, then a tenfold spark, then maybe a shred, then a segment, then a chunk, then a lump, then a piece, then a section, and just perceive that spark of God as the real you becoming visible through your loving and inviting attentiveness until you feel the sacred presence of your higher self as the guiding light of your life. Ultimately, as I'll talk about later, it will overtake the you that's been dominated by an ego and your sensory apparatus. That former speck of a spark will become the foundation of your life. You might conceptualize this former spark as a sacred light inside of your head that is the same size as your brain. Now you've had a big piece of God to assist you in attaining a status wherein the fulfillment of your wishes becomes a no-brainer, or perhaps you'd call it a new-brainer. This new brain is comprised exclusively of infinite God energy. Your higher self at work every day. I want you to seriously contemplate another observation made by the initiatic spiritual master Omram Mikhail Ivanov in a lecture given in January of 1971. This is a lecture that I've listened to many times. Quote, "Our higher self is perfect, omniscient, and almighty, a fragment of God himself, a pure, transparent, luminous quintessence. This will very likely be a challenge for you as you consider a new concept of yourself by accepting some truths that you have been raised to believe are falsehoods. Yet I ask you to study this ancient spiritual teaching, which is designed to familiarize you with a radical idea about the powers you possess just by the fact that you are a living, breathing human being. If you are committed to accessing your higher consciousness, then you must be willing to do what is required in order to integrate what this great initiatic teacher is offering. In order to accomplish becoming an almighty being, your higher self, that is God, must be enlarged from a spark to a more meaningful portion of your essence. Since you are a piece of God, and therefore have that within you, you needn't doubt your own divinity. As Jesus reminds you in the New Testament, "Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are God's?" That's from the book of John 10:34. As a growing spark of God, you must be willing to say, that portion of myself that has not edged God out, that is ego, must be perfect. It is all-knowing, and it is almighty. There is nothing that this higher self, that I am, cannot accomplish. Once again, let's look back at something Jesus told us. Quote, "With God, all things are possible." That's in the book of Matthew 19:26. All things are possible leaves nothing out. As my teachers in the initiatic sciences frequently reminded me, this higher self, that portion of God that is us, only begins to notice us and give us the attention we crave when we enlarge it from a tiny spark and invite that energy into our life. Your awareness that God isn't something external to you, but rather a portion of yourself, is truly a giant step in your spiritual evolution. You can tell yourself with genuine knowing, I am perfect. All forms of I am have tremendous significance, as you will learn when you listen to the next chapter on your highest self. In this chapter, you are discovering your higher self. God no longer resides outside of you, and no longer plays favorites. In short, you've revised humankind's image of a God created in its own egoistic idea of itself. A God who knows how to heal, yet withholds healing from some and offers it to others who are presumed to have paid some kind of dues. A God who is angry. A God who gives humans the pleasure of sexuality, but promises to burn in hell those who don't follow rules devised by other humans. A God who gives us eyes and remains invisible, but threatens damnation for those who don't believe in him. A God who demands to be paid for services with fancy temples and gold-lined costumes for his highest representative. This is a God of the ego. Your higher self is a piece of an all-loving, all-embracing, creative source. All you need do is accept that this is not something external to yourself. It resides within you. The kingdom of heaven is within. In fact, it is you. And all you need do is begin to align yourself with this divine essence. Begin to act like it acts and think like it thinks. And you will begin the process of manifesting just as it does. This is the true essence of living a life in which your wishes are fulfilled, giving your divine nature a chance. The second part of this program provides a step-by-step plan for allowing your higher self to take over the process of fulfilling your desires. In these opening chapters, I hope to jar you into an awareness of how powerful a being you really are when you get past so much of the nonsensical conditioning that has dominated your enculturation. Toss out any self-limiting ideas about your divine nature and what it is capable of achieving. Befriend that spark. Consult it frequently. Nurture it. Pay close attention to it. Believe in it. And practice describing yourself first as a spiritual being, one who lives as frequently as possible from this all-loving, all-giving, all-joyful place called your higher self. Your higher self is just what it says, higher than your false self, higher than your material physical self. It is the part of you that is aligned with your very source of being. In the next chapter, you have the opportunity to consider an even more unlikely assertion in light of all that you've been exposed to since childhood. Not only do you have a lower ego-based false self, as well as a spiritually based higher self that is a piece of God, But you have a highest self, a self that you have been trained to believe is not something that you should ever claim. Your highest self awaits you in chapter 3, the next chapter. Here are 3 suggestions for implementing the ideas of this chapter. 1. Set aside multiple times during your day to stop and ask yourself this key question. Right now, in what I am about to say or do my desires stem from my lower or my higher self? The ego is all about self-serving, ownership, winning, judging, and so on. The higher self is about serving, loving, and being in a non-judgmental state of peace. Ask yourself this question and create the opportunity to align yourself more fully with God. You then have access to the same powers of manifestation as your source of being. This question, when honestly explored, helps you align with the power to fulfill your wishes and desires. You don't need to abolish your ego animal nature. You do need to keep it tamed, but it isn't allowed to overshadow or destroy your spirit. Give your divine nature a chance by asking yourself this question. Right now, in what I am about to say or do my desires stem from my lower or my higher self? A very important question. Second suggestion. Spend some of your quiet meditation time visualizing a tiny spark of awareness glowing within your being. Practice seeing this God portion of yourself expanding its glow within your mind. See it growing into a personally satisfying size. Continue this expansion exercise, sensing the spark and glow as your God essence. You will begin acting from this inner God-realized image. And the third suggestion, use these affirmations frequently. I am all-knowing. I am all-powerful. I am unlimited. This helps you banish doubt and refer to this portion of yourself that lives in a spiritual world of no restrictions. Simply affirm to yourself without explaining to others or demonstrating pride in what you're doing. You are ridding yourself of ego-dominated mental messages that continue to want to convince you that you are primarily your body and its 5 senses. Chapter 3, Your Highest Self. And here is a display quote from the book of Philippians 2, verses 5 and 6. Quote, Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. In the previous chapter, you explored the idea that there's a spark of God within you which you can choose to expand into a consciously larger component of your daily life. This spark is your spiritual essence, your higher self. As your awareness increases that you are a God-realized being, you will welcome it as the central focus of your life. The concept of your higher self will gradually evolve into your highest self, which is truly omniscient, almighty, and capable of producing miracles. Here you will see a new reality, a majestic idea of yourself that previously seemed inconceivable. Your highest self is described in the pronouncement in the display quote that I just read, written by St. Paul in his letters to the Philippians in the New Testament. You move from being a spark or a fragment of God to being able to assert that I am God, and not feel as if you're committing blasphemy or a cardinal sin by such a declaration. Here, the idea that you are equal with God was promoted by Jesus Christ, and you are encouraged by him to let this mind be in you. This isn't the God created by humans, the ego-driven deity who plays favorites and requires ostentatious places of worship, has temper tantrums, demands reparations, and is filled with rage, punishing those who do not do his bidding. Not even close. I am speaking here of the creative source of all being, a God who is responsible for creating the miraculous movement from non-being to being, a God who is formless, who does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone, a God who is everywhere. This is a divine invisible presence that's within you. This idea is at the basis of all great spiritual teaching throughout all time. Much of organized religious teaching proclaims that God is an all-powerful being outside of you. That idea has been thrown at you since you were old enough to process this absurd notion. God, you are told, watches you and punishes you if you misbehave, but listens to your prayers and helps you resolve your conflicts if you do the right thing and please him. Perhaps it is a radical idea for you to declare, I am God, and God is love, or to believe that he who abides in love abides in God and God in him, from the book of 1 John 4:16, is who you actually are. When you are this God, your essence of pure love, it is all you have to give away. And when you realign yourself in this vein, once again quoting Jesus the Christ, quote, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Now, all things are possible leaves out nothing, including your ability to fulfill any and all wishes that are aligned with God. You may find it difficult at first to be able to assert to yourself that I am God, but when you put it into the context of God as love, and pure love allows you to be almighty, all-knowing, and God-realized, you will, I assure you, begin to regain the omnipotence that is your essence from the moment of your transition from non-being or spirit to being, that is human. I emphasize these teachings of Jesus to show that the declaration of I am God is not only not in opposition to the teachings of Christianity or other spiritual practices, but is fully aligned with these earlier teachings. The reason it may seem blasphemous to say that I am God is because we've adopted the God of the ego, created by humans from ego-based ideas of a God that imitates our most unholy human attributes. I've been studying two great spiritual teachers in depth for several years as I prepared to write this book. One of them is U.S. Anderson, and the book of his that I read, studied, meditated upon, and am now living and teaching is titled 3 Magic Words. The book is 323 pages long, and it was not until the last chapter, after many specific meditations and exercises, after many enlightening words on consciousness, intuition, faith, love, success, immortality, and more, and after investing time and energy in what is being taught by the author, that I discovered what the 3 magic words actually are. Here's the beginning of the final chapter titled The Key. Quote, this is the ineffable secret, the ultimate illumination, the key to peace and power. You are God. If you will accept this towering truth, dare to stand atop this magnificent pinnacle, universal consciousness will be revealed to you from within. God is there. It is He who peers from behind your eyes, who is your own consciousness, who is your very self. You are not just a part of God, you are altogether God, and God is altogether you, unquote. This is your highest self. It's indeed a towering assumption, but one, if used in context and alignment with the creative source of all, that is the key to mastering the ability to live a life of your own wishes being fulfilled. After all, with God as you, and you as God, all things are possible. This is not an assertion limited to Western teachings or the Christian faith. In the Vedanta, the ancient pre-Christian teachings, we are reminded that we are not a part of, but identical with, that absolute spirit of the world. The first pathway is called discipline. All right, so this is like you have to train the body. Right? So you have to go to practice.
Yes.
Right? The second, now we're not talking about education here, we're talking about mastery. The second pathway is called wisdom. And that is the application of the mind to what you've trained yourself to do. So if you're going out to learn how to shoot a basket, or to hit a tennis ball, or to make a lemon meringue pie, or dance the Macarena, or anything, the first thing you do is you train your body, you get it in shape, and the second thing you do is you apply wisdom, the mind, to it. Right? Now this is what we mean by education. So that if we send our children off to school, we say to them, get some discipline and use your head. And basically you've got an education.
Yes.
But that's not mastery. The top 2 levels of mastery include, the third one's called unconditional love. I watched Pavarotti sing at one of the 3 tenors, Sylvia Wynter's concert, the 42,000 of us at a football stadium in Florida.
Yeah.
And they had a screen on him, Michael, that was 30 feet high. That's 3 stories high, and they showed a close-up of him. Now, this is a man, how many times has he sang O Sole Mio in Italian, all right? There's nobody in the stadium understands Italian, but it doesn't matter. They show a close-up on his face on this 30-foot screen, and he is in bliss. He's just in bliss. And I said to my wife, who was sitting next to me, I said, honey, I said, this guy has obviously gone to practice. I mean, you've got to practice to be the best in the world. And he's also, obviously, he's got great wisdom. He has studied. But that's not what makes him the greatest tenor in the world. I said, look at the love. Oh, so love me. I mean, he was just, every fiber of him was involved in this. He was just he was in love with what he was doing. And he wasn't selling us the song, he was selling us the love.
Yes.
That's the third pathway. But the highest pathway, what we really call mastery, is what we call surrender, which is when you get to that place where you realize that this is not you who's doing any of this, that you're not this body, this is not your home, this is not you that's doing it. There's something that you're connecting to called spirit or consciousness or higher awareness, and you're allowing God, I guess, if you will, to flow through you and send that out into the world. That's what the highest of them are. I mean, Michael Jordan says, I don't know how I do that. I just surrender.
Yes.
You know, that whole idea of being able to get your ego out of the way. I was just asked the question in South Africa, but they were interviewing me, one of the newspapers there, and the woman hit me with this question. She said, "What's been the greatest accomplishment of your life?" And my ego started really going into, high gear, and I was thinking about, how many books I'd written, how many times I'd appeared on the Tonight Show, or where I was on bestseller lists and all of this. I would I wasn't saying a word. I was just sort of rattling all of these things off that my ego wanted to say, and then finally it hit me, and I said to the woman, I said, I think the greatest accomplishment of my life has been my ability to tame my ego, and to no longer see myself as what I have and what I do and what other people think of me. I'm not my possessions. I'm not my accomplishments. I'm not my reputation. I've been able to see myself as a spiritual being, if you will, having that human experience, and that is involved with letting go. As they say in that recovery movement, you let go and you let God. And that may sound trite, but it's really one of the great secrets to being able to attract and manifest into your life. One of the people that I selected in Wisdom of the Ages or selected me, was this man who we don't even know when he was born or when he lived. His name was Patanjali. I'm sure you're familiar with Patanjali, the original Yoga Sutras. Yes. And his book, How to Know God.
Yes.
And
wonderful translation by Swami Prabhupada and Christopher Isherwood.
Yes, I have that.
Yeah, it's a great translation of that. Yes.
And it's just, I mean, every page. I've never read a book that I have. When I read it, I read a page or two and I set it down, and I can't wait to get back to it. But I don't want to read it because I'm afraid it's going to end. Okay, that's how I feel about that book.
Right. Because
there's so much masterful kinds of experiences and aphorisms in there that we can apply and really, really reach these miraculous levels. Anyway, one of the passages that I used from Patanjali was about this concept called inspiration, which is really what we're talking about here, because the word inspiration, of course, comes from in spirit. And the word information comes from inform. So this is the age of information, and there's no shortage of information on this planet. With a computer chip that can put the name and address of everybody in the United States on it, and it's the size of your thumbnail. We've got plenty of information.
Yes.
But what we have is a spiritual deficit, a deficit of spirit. So Patanjali talked about becoming inspired as a source of, and this is what he said. He said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all of your thoughts break their bonds, your mind transcends limitations, your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new and a great and a wonderful world. And then he had this alarming thing to say. I laminated this and carried it with me. He said, dormant forces, faculties, and talents come alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. And all you have to do is become inspired, that is, move into the world of spirit. And once we do that, once we leave the form, once we leave the ego, once we leave the idea that I am what I have and what I do and my reputation, what others think of me, and begin to see ourselves as the beloved, as connected to rather than separate from God, and allow that higher spiritual awareness to flow into our lives. I think that's what we mean when we say surrender, when we say let go. I know when I'm writing,
If I let go, my writing is blissful and easy. When I struggle with it and I try to think about the right word and so on, I get stuck. Same in an interview, or the same in when I'm speaking on stage, or whatever. When I let go, it's the old aphorism: when the student is ready,
Yes.
the teachers appear.
I've adopted the following list from a fascinating book called The Disappearance of the Universe, published by Hay House in 2004 by Gary Renard, which gives an account of two spiritual visitors teaching Gary the significance of A Course in Miracles. Whether you accept the premise or not is your option. I find these teachings to be profound, and they merit consideration. Number 1, the ego says you're a body. The Holy Spirit says you're not even a person. You're just like me, your source of being. This teaching shows that our ego insists we're impermanent, which is opposed to our being what Lao Tzu taught, that which never changes. That's what we are, that which never changes. Lao Tzu was a 6th century BC mystical spiritual teacher and author of the Tao. When we think about our life here on earth, we can't avoid the awareness that everything we experience, including our body, returns to dust to be recycled by spirit. Our ego finds this concept impossible to accept. 2, the ego says your thoughts are very, very important. The Holy Spirit insists only thoughts you think with God are real. Nothing else matters. This teaching explains that thoughts centering on ourselves, appearance, possessions, fears, or relationship problems are not only unimportant, they're not real. Ouch! The ego flinches at such commentary. But if we examine these thoughts from Spirit's infinite perspective, we see that we're indeed unreal. When we're totally immersed in Spirit, we only had thoughts of Spirit because that's all we were. When we left it behind, we opted for thoughts that our ego told us were important. A Course in Miracles tells us that we didn't even have to think in heaven because we were thought by God. So we can access permanent inspiration by letting ourselves once again be thought by God and achieve a state of heaven on earth. 3, your ego says, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. The Holy Spirit asserts, God only gives and never takes away. When living an inspired life, we're focused on giving our life away and simultaneously observing how it's returned, thus fortifying the idea of what goes around comes around. Ego is constantly telling us to be fearful about losing what we have and warning us of greedy others who will take what's ours. But God doesn't take away from us. As we learn to think this way, we attract more of what's missing in our life. The reason for this is simple. We become what we think about. If we think about giving, like God does, the universe will provide. If we think about things being taken away, then that's what we'll attract. 4, the ego says there's good and bad. The Holy Spirit maintains there's nothing to judge because it isn't real in the first place. When we accept the ego identification card, we agree to judge almost everyone and everything in terms of good or bad. The problem with this is that we all contain the same spirit from which we originated. If I make you bad and myself good, for instance, I deny the presence of spirit in you, whom I elected to judge. God sees it quite differently. Our spiritual source knows that only it is real. All of the ephemeral world of form and boundaries is not of its infinite nature. At our core, the place where we all originated from and return to, there's no one and nothing to judge. This takes some time to get used to, but once we grasp the truth of this observation, we're free to tap into authentic inspiration. 5, the ego directs love and hate toward individuals. The Holy Spirit's love is nonspecific and all-encompassing. Ego directs us to love some, be indifferent toward many, and hate all others. When we learn to be back in spirit on a full-time basis, we discover what we knew in our pre-ego time. There's no they. There's only one. The one source of all-encompassing love knows nothing of boundaries, differing customs, geographic divisions, family splits, or differences in race, creed, sex, and so on. It only knows love for all. Jesus points so perfectly to the differences between ego and spirit. When we were in spirit, we were a child of our Father in heaven. And, quote, He causes His sun to rise on the evil and the good. Matthew 5:45. This, of course, means that it's all one. Evil, good, righteous, and unrighteous are all the same. Some move away from the Father and some move toward him. This is such an important and powerful lesson to get as we move toward becoming inspired by living in spirit. 6. The ego devises clever reasons why we should continue to listen to its selfish counsel. The Holy Spirit is certain that at some point we'll turn toward it and ultimately return. Ego will tout its irresistible logic to assure us that our body, our possessions, and our achievements are all very real and important. It convinces us by insisting that what's real is what we can see, touch, hear, taste, and smell. Therefore, invisible spirit isn't real. So ego continues to be attached to stuff and to make the acquisition of money and power a lifelong objective. To that end, it wants us to disdain forgiveness in favor of seeking revenge. Very persuasive logic when we look around and see almost everyone doing just that. Through the lens of inspiration, however, we're able to see how ego has distorted the message of the Holy Spirit. Instead of seeking revenge, we're more likely to see a very sad nation of strivers and virtually no arrivers, a gaggle of pill-poppers searching outside of themselves for a resolution to their depressing, anxiety-filled, joyless, and often lonely lives. As we return to the Holy Spirit, we'll no longer be under the influence of ego's absurd counsel. And 7. The ego wants us to regret our past. The Holy Spirit wants us to practice unconditional forgiveness. The Holy Spirit isn't limited by a past or a future. There's only the eternal now. Any energy we place on what transpired in the past is groundwork for guilt, and ego loves guilt. Such negative energy fabricates an excuse for why our present moments are troubled and gives us a cop-out, a reason to stay out of spirit. And thinking about what we've been or what we did wrong in the past are great impediments to an inspired life. On the other hand, when we're inspired, we're totally engaged in the now. In an infinite, never-beginning and never-ending universe, there can be no past. All guilt and regret simply serve as ways to avoid being here in the only moment we have, which is now. This is where we reconnect to spirit, now. If we choose to use up this holy instant with regrets about a past that's only an illusory thought, then we're unable to be in the joyful, loving, peaceful present moment. Cramming this holy moment with thoughts of guilt, remorse, and regret is great for ego and keeps us totally resistant to being in spirit. These 7 messages are the dominant ones the ego drones on about. If we don't listen, it will try to drown out inspiration by intensifying worrisome and fearful thoughts. I've managed to tame this annoying voice of the ego so that its influence is almost negligible in my life.
These are principles that I don't think have to be that complicated. Principles that are characteristic of those who take the road less traveled, who are on the uncrowded mile. And here they are. If you can live them and practice them and work on them or help others to do so, perhaps we can collectively begin to counterbalance some of the negativity of those who can't make the distinction between falsehood and truth. Have a mind that is open to everything, attached nowhere. Go through life with an idea that anything is possible. Don't die with your music still in you. Listen to the voices you hear, regardless of what others may say. Remember, you can never give away what you don't have. So if you're looking for love, don't look in all the wrong places. Look inside, give it away, and you'll attract it into your life. Embrace silence. Know that God's one and only voice is silent, and all of your creativity and all that you are destined to be able to do here when you showed up with this heroic mission is in the void. It's in the silence, and it will come out of that silence. Give up your personal history. Don't be attached to all that has happened in the past. It's just a wake. It's just a trail that is left behind. And the wake can never drive the boat. Remind yourself always that whatever problems you have, you can't solve them with the same mind that created it. Rewrite your agreement with reality. Make anything up your possibility. Rid yourself of all of those resentments that you justify. There are no justifiable resentments. They will all destroy you. Treat yourself as if you already were what you would really like to become. Act it out. See yourself as having abundance. See yourself as being healthy. See yourself as being happy. See yourself playing that trumpet, and you won't be able to do anything else. Treasure your divinity. God doesn't make any junk. And finally, remind yourself that to be wise is to avoid all thoughts which weaken you. And every thought you have does one or the other, will either weaken or strengthen you. I think of those who don't recognize this great power, this force that is in everything and everyone, that opens the flowers and allows the butterflies to flap their wings, and who thinks it's all some great big accident. I love this story of the Buddha. And the Buddha is traveling, and everywhere he travels, he encounters criticism and hate and disrespect from all of these people who have done nothing but choose to see if they can bring him down. And always he responds with peace. Always he responds with love. And after 3 or 4 days of seeing these people continuously harassing him and ridiculing him and finding fault with him and being ugly and so on, his devotees say, how can you do that? After 3 days of nothing but receiving that kind of energy, you still always have love. And the Buddha answered this question with a question. He said, if someone offers you a gift and you do not accept that gift, to whom does the gift belong? And what he's saying is, if someone offers you a gift of their negativity, of their lower energy, of their criticism, of their hatred or whatever, and you simply don't accept it, who owns it? And if they own it and it's theirs, why would you allow yourself to be upset, depressed, stressed, hurt by something that is owned elsewhere? That's all you have to remind yourself of. And you'd be surprised. You know, it's a good thing to work on. It's a good thing to practice, especially if you have kids, because, boy, they give you so many opportunities to do this, where you can work at seeing if you can change that energy around, if you can make it go from low to high. Just see if you can raise it just ever so slightly. All of you instinctively know how to do it, because you're born with that quality. It's just that we've lost it when we took on the ego. Thank you, and God bless you.
Just as the state of your life is a reflection of your state of mind, so too is the state of the world a reflection of our collective state of mind. Understanding this leads to knowing that we are capable of creating a world of real magic in the same way that I have been encouraging you to create real magic in your own individual life. The universe we live in works in exactly the same way as the universe that is within us. In order to create a world of real magic, it is necessary to know within that this is your job to accomplish. You cannot resign in anguish if others refuse to see the light. Know that you can radiate outwardly all of the messages in this tape and create the kind of real magical world that you envision. One of your biggest challenges may be in refusing to sit in judgment of those things which you perceive to be wrong or imperfect. The perceived inequities in the world are truly part of the perfection of the universe, but so is your desire to end them. If you stand way back in your mind, you will note that a revolution of spiritual dimensions is taking place right now. The Berlin Wall was built to last 1,000 years, yet today it is nothing more than a relic of an ancient non-spiritual past. That shrine of tyranny is but one of many that are toppling faster than we can update the history books. There is a new collective consciousness in the minds of people, and a new spiritual awareness is spreading throughout humanity. Nothing can stop it, for nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Communism, which insists upon atheism from its subjects, has been declared an international failure. Rulers can remove the outer places of worship, but the inner place, that invisible corner of freedom that is ever present in each of us, cannot be legislated. In China, where more than 1 billion souls are temporarily residing, 1 million of those souls face tanks to demonstrate their desire for freedom. And while the messengers can temporarily be imprisoned, the message cannot be halted. These changes are all taking place in the minds of individuals and spreading to other individuals to form a collective consciousness. Once the ideas become present in a large enough number of us, They become our reality. This number is called a critical mass. The force cannot be stopped. Some will try, but they will be swept away by the power of an idea whose time has come. The changes in the world are not restricted to political realignments and new nuclear policies. A new spiritual consciousness toward our environment has manifested itself into action as well. The idea that we should treat the earth with sacred reverence is being translated into physical realities. You are seeing the fruits of these thoughts blooming everywhere. All of the changes that you see taking place around you, which reflect a growing concern for the individual, for a peaceful, safe, harmonious world, are part of a glorious revolution that is taking place first and most importantly in our thoughts. You are a part of that process. Whatever thoughts you have can and will be spread to those around you. You influence the physical world with your thoughts. Of that you should be most convinced, having listened to this tape. If this revolution, this new way of being, is to take hold and overcome all of the remaining non-spirituality that infects the world, it will have to reach a critical mass in all areas of our existence. The most important question to be asking yourself as you look to find your own place in this spiritual revolution is, how do I see the world I live in? If you want, you can deny the spiritual revolution I have described. Instead, see a world that is slowly but surely deteriorating into a non-spiritual morass. That will be your experience of the world you live in. Yet those who see the light of the world view the dark spots as merely potential light. Where is your place in the spiritual revolution? You are here on purpose to help make these changes manifest more profoundly and permanently into the consciousness of all of mankind. Your place in this revolution will solidify if you fill yourself with love. You must be able to radiate outward all that you are gaining in your spiritual consciousness. You have the power to do just that if you make that choice. As you do this on your own personal and local level, you will find yourself expanding and reaching more and more people. That is precisely what has been happening with all of the spiritual revolution changes that you see around you. You are truly the world, and your thoughts do make all the difference in this world. Have reverence for your mind. Treat your invisible inner reality with sacred, blissful appreciation. In all that I have said about creating real magic, nothing is more important than your coming into contact with the higher part of yourself. At first, you will very likely reject this notion of yourself as a miracle worker in the worldwide realm of real magic. Increasingly, however, people are believing in their own divinity and trusting in the divine wisdom that created them. They are helping to create the spiritual revolution that is now occurring. You, one person with a vision, are like a pebble in a stream, moving ever outward to infinity, impacting on all who come into contact with that ripple, which creates the spiritual world I believe in so strongly. You make all the difference in the world. Your presence here is a divine necessity, perfect and purposeful. This is your miracle-making in action. By aligning yourself with your spiritual side first rather than secondarily, you will radiate out that peace that is within. You will not be dissuaded from your mission just because others are not with you. You will stay focused on what you are for in all areas of your life. The bad news, the emphasis in the media on tragedy and pessimism will not capture your attention. You will note these as areas for improvement, but your inner divine self will be noting also how many acts of healing, kindness, and friendliness outnumber those of suffering. It truly thrills me that I have been able to create this work on real magic from within my mind. It has been a magical journey for me. I shiver inside with the awareness that it can make a difference in your life and in the entire physical world we are all immersed in. My closing quotation is from the ancient writer Philo. Households, cities, countries, and nations have enjoyed great happiness when a single individual has taken heed of the good and beautiful. Such people do not only liberate themselves, they fill those they meet with a free mind. You are that single individual, becoming a spiritual being and taking heed of the good and the beautiful. You will indeed fill yourself and those around you with a new freedom in their minds, the freedom to create real magic. God bless you.
I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, "You've got to say something to me."
You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, this hat. And this is your past. Now you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it, as I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today. And the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. Wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child who believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness, or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." She said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, I live in a very big city. And she said, they're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you. And she said, it's really not very pleasant. She said, that's one of the reasons I'm leaving there. I said, well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here. That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "It's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that. I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect. It's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life.
Every single person on the planet has within them the potential to be a healer. In order to make conscious contact with your inherent healing powers, you must first make the decision to be healed yourself. Reconnect to the disease-free, loving perfection from which you came is a succinct statement of what self-healing process requires. The universal mind of intention knows precisely what you need in order to optimize your health. What you must do is notice your thoughts and your behaviors, which are creating resistance and interfering with healing, which is the flow of intentional energy. Recognizing your resistance is something that's entirely up to you. That source is never focused on what's wrong, what's missing, or even what's sickly. True healing takes you back to the source. Anything short of this connection is just a temporary fix. When you clean up the connecting link to your source, attractor patterns of energy are drawn to you. If you don't believe that this is possible, then you've created resistance to your intention to heal and to be healed. If you believe that it is possible, but not for you, then you have more resistance. If you believe that you're being punished by the absence of health, that's also resistance. These inner thoughts about your ability to be healed play a dominant role in your physical experience. Becoming a healer by healing oneself involves another one of those imaginary somersaults into the inconceivable, where you land upright and balanced in your thoughts, face to face with your source. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that you and your source are one when you let go of the ego mind, which has convinced you that you're separate from the power of intention. From thoughts of sickness to intentions of wellness. The decision to create is the decision to intend. To create healing, you can't have thoughts of illness and anticipate your body falling victim to disease. Become aware of the thoughts you have that support the idea of sickness as something to be expected. Begin noticing the frequency of those thoughts. The more they occupy your mental landscape, the more resistance you're creating to realizing your intention. You know what those thoughts of resistance sound like. I can't do anything about this arthritis. It's the flu season. I feel okay now, but by the weekend it'll be in my chest and I'll have a fever. We live in a carcinogenic world. Everything is either fattening or filled with chemicals. I feel so tired all of the time. On and on and on these thoughts of resistance go. They're like huge barricades blocking the realization of your intentions. Notice the thoughts that represent a decision on your part to buy into the illness mentality of the huge profit-making drug companies and a healthcare industry that thrives on your fears. But you're the divine, remember? You're a piece of the universal mind of intention, and you don't have to think in these ways. You can opt to think that you have the ability to raise your energy level, even if all of the advertising around you points to a different conclusion. You can go within and hold an intention that says, I want to feel good. I intend to feel good. I intend to return to my source, and I refuse to allow any other thoughts of disorder or disease in. This is the beginning. You'll feel empowered by this unique experience. Then in any given moment of not feeling well, choose thoughts of healing and feeling good. In that instant, feeling good takes over, if only for a few seconds. Illness is not a punishment. You don't have a need for healing because you were bad or ignorant or as retribution for past life offenses. You've taken on whatever you're experiencing for whatever lessons you need to learn on this journey, which is being orchestrated by the all-providing intelligence that we're calling intention. In an eternal universe, you must view yourself and all others in infinite terms. Infinite terms means that you have an infinite number of opportunities to show up in a material body to co-create anything. As you view the sickness of the mind and body that permeates your own life as well as the rest of humanity, try viewing it as part of the infinite nature of our world. If starvation, pestilence, or disease are a part of the perfection of the universe, then so is your intention to end these things a part of that same perfection. Now decide to stay with that intention, first in your own life, then in the lives of others. Your intention will match up with the intention of the universe, which knows nothing of egos and separation, and all thoughts of illness as punishment and karmic paybacks will cease to exist. You can't heal anyone until you allow yourself to be healed. Connect to a loving, kind, receptive to healing energy, which is the field that intended you here. Be willing to accept the fact that you're a part of the healing energy of all of life. The same force that heals a cut on your hand and grows the new skin to repair it permanently is both in your hand and in the universe as well. You are it. It is you. There's no separation. Be conscious of staying in contact with this healing energy because it's impossible to separate from it except in your ego-diminished thoughts. By raising your energy to a vibrational match with the field of intention, you're strengthening your immune system and increasing the production of well-being enzymes in the brain. A change in personality from being spiteful, pessimistic, angry, sullen, and disagreeable to one of passion, optimism, kindness, joy, and understanding is often the key when witnessing miraculous acts of spontaneous recovery from what were called fatalistic prognostications. Don't ask to be healed, ask to be restored to that perfection from which you emanated. Let nothing interfere with the intention that you have to heal and be healed. Discard all negativity that you encounter. Refuse to let in any energy that will weaken your body or your resolve. Convey this to others as well. Remember, you're not asking your source to heal you because this assumes health is missing from your life. Come to the source as whole and complete. Banish all thoughts of illness and know that by connecting back to this source, filling yourself with it, and offering it to others, you become healing itself.
How would we think and act in daily life if we were truly aware of our divine essence? Obviously, there wouldn't be room to reproach yourself because we wouldn't doubt our abilities. In fact, we'd never look in the mirror and feel anything but love and appreciation. We'd see ourselves as fully capable of attracting all we desire. We'd treat our body with reverence and care, giving thanks for its divine design. We'd celebrate every thought we have, knowing its divine origin, and we'd become aware of our enormous talents and be awed by all that we are. We need to encourage the awareness of our magnificence in every regard. When that awareness has been reawakened, the seedlings of inspiration will begin blossoming. Here's a way of expressing these fundamental truths offered by the writings of the Baha'i Faith. This most great, this fathomless and surging ocean is near, astonishingly near, unto you. Behold, it is closer to you than your life vein. Swift as the twinkling of an eye you can, if you but wish it, reach and partake of this imperishable favor, this God-given grace, this incorruptible gift, this most potent and unspeakably glorious bounty. There's no way to be in spirit without a changed awareness. So when we accomplish this, we give ourselves the gift of moving from being flawed, limited, lacking, and imperfect to being completely comfortable with our magnificence. This unspeakably glorious bounty is so close to us, all we have to do is make a few twinkling of an eye adjustments. So why not begin right now? Here are 3 of the most obvious and important changes in awareness that you can make. 1. Changing the awareness of our magnificent talents and abilities. I want to emphasize an extremely important point. I'm not talking about self-esteem here, nor am I referring to levels of confidence. Rather, I'm saying that we need to keep the important question, who am I, in the forefront of our mind. This question doesn't revolve around previous life experiences, has nothing to do with what we've been told our special qualities or unique abilities are, and it isn't related to how worthy or worthless we feel about ourselves. It has to do with a simple truth. As Epictetus, a philosopher in the 1st century AD, said, "You carry a God about within you, poor wretch, and know nothing of it." Just like Epictetus, who was born into slavery yet became one of our most profound teachers, we came into this world with an inexhaustible supply of talent. Our abilities are as limitless as God's are, because we're a distinct portion of the essence of Him. And there's an infallible way to begin entertaining those abilities and creating as He does. That way is to become aware that anything that excites us is a clue that we have the ability to pursue it. Anything that truly intrigues us is evidence of a divine, albeit latent, talent that's signaling our awareness. Having an interest in something is the clue to a thought that's connected to our calling. That thought is a vibration of energy in this vast universe. If something really appeals to us and we feel excited but perceive ourselves as devoid of the talent we think is necessary, it's probably an even higher vibration. Anything that's causing excitement within us is evidence of a spirit message that's saying, you can do this. Yes, you can. If we react to this message with anything other than, "You're correct, I can do this, I have the ability to do it," then we've selected the vibration of resistance and ignored the vibration of excitement and interest that spoke to us. Our thoughts about who we are, what excites us, and what we feel called to be and do are all divinely inspired and come with whatever guidance and assistance we'll need to actualize these goals. The decision at this point is, are we willing to listen to these divine thoughts that pique our interest, or do we go on listening to the false self that's made us what Epictetus called a poor wretch? Rather than case studies of which I have only second-hand knowledge, I'm going to use some examples from my own life that illustrate listening to the false self. My background would appear to be an unlikely one for what I'm calling magnificence. Here's what it would look like on paper. Fathered by an alcoholic who abandoned his 3 children, childhood years spent in foster homes, a classic underachiever, educated in public schools, grew up at the low end of the socioeconomic scale, no financial advantages, no examples of or ambitions for higher education, 4 years as an enlisted man in the United States Navy, admitted to a university on a provisional acceptance at the age of 22 due to lower than average grades in high school, worked his way through 3 advanced degrees by being a cashier and a stock boy in a grocery store in Detroit. This isn't exactly what you'd call a prescription for becoming the best-selling author of 28 books and a successful public speaker. I couldn't begin to tell you how many teachers of creative writing and speech gave me low grades for my efforts in these fields. All I can say for certain is that I've always had a knowing about my interest in writing, have always been excited by the prospect of entertaining and informing an audience, any audience. By all of the accepted standards, I didn't have any writing ability. What I did have, and still do, was an interest and a passion for writing. It inspired and thrilled me, and I simply loved it. From the perspective of inspiration, I had the ability to do it, and that's all I needed to know. Then as now, I trusted that the universe would handle all of the details, including, will I be published? Will the critics approve? Will my book be a bestseller? Will my mother approve? Will I get an apology from any of my old English teachers? But really, who cares about any of this? The fact that writing excites me is all I've ever needed to know. When I follow that thought and stay with it, I conclude that I have the ability and the talent. And so do you. Like me, it's easy to find what excites you. What do you find intriguing? Does learning yoga and becoming an instructor interest you? Then you have your answer. The issue isn't about ability, it's about being matched up in spirit with your current thoughts and behaviors.
To change the thought from notice me, to what Lao Tzu calls living in obscurity, becoming more obscure. We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble. Because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. Verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand. And I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am? I mean, there's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? I mean, CNN is doing, full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrities never even done anything. And it's, there's all of this talk about it. And all of the new magazines. I mean, and you go through an airport and you look on the newsstand and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed. When in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, I mean, Louise never would have advertised the fact of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am, and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to do it anonymously, to say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, "The gentle outlast the strong. The obscure outlast the obvious." Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just stop and to bite your tongue and say, "Tell me more." Or, "That's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before." Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop. Practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure. And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like something. Right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time, as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place. You gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Now you will hear about 3 energy fields and ways of keeping them uncontaminated. The first energy field is your immediate energy body, which I also refer to as etheric or faster. From a standing position, extend your arm forward and mentally note the most distant point where your fingers extend. Now imagine your arm extending straight above your head to a point over your body, and then behind you and beneath you as well. You now have an image of a field of energy which continuously surrounds your body. I call this field your fast energy body, which is inseparable from your solid and visible slower energy body. Using your imagination, take a moment now to visualize this field of faster energy with its edges or boundaries around you. When another person, particularly a stranger, crosses your boundary, you immediately feel as if you've been invaded. You move back instinctively to create a safer distance. Why? Because your energy body feels the invasive force and alerts you with a state of discomfort.
If someone remains in your energy body field for an extended period of time, they begin to affect your entire being with their energy, bringing you down if you feel out of sync with them, and raising you up if they resonate to a higher energy vibration than you. I refer to the second energy field as your broader environmental energy field. To get a sense of this physical energy field, think about your energy field extending into your home, your workplace, your family, and your community. The vibrational pattern of this energy field is your broader environmental energy field. This energy field, in which your solid body walks and talks and sleeps and works and plays, is impacted by the energy frequency of whoever enters it. Now I want you to think of a field of energy so immense that you cannot even create imaginary boundaries for it. I call this the mind field energy. Your thoughts and the thoughts of others interact in your mind field in such a way as to raise or lower your frequency of vibration. When the thoughts and feelings of others impinge upon your mind energy field, there will be one of two results. Either your energy field will be increased, as is said to have happened when Buddha and Jesus entered a village. Just their presence in the village and nothing more would raise the consciousness of those around them. Or your energy field will be decreased and consequently become contaminated. The way others think and how they radiate out their thought energy can impact you. But it is not only people who impact your energy fields. Noise levels, air quality, food purity, all touch and affect your fields of energy. What you may not realize is that you play a potent role in keeping your energy fields clean and uncontaminated, and that you also have a salubrious and cleansing effect on the energy field of those around you. Hopefully, you will be motivated to begin implementing a new approach that will clear all of your energy fields and maintain a state of clarity, free of energy patterns that contaminate your life in any way. How do you treat this body, which is the living organism that sends out the waves of electromagnetic energy? What foods do you use to replenish and replace it with? What toxins do you absorb? How much peaceful rest do you provide for it? Do you exercise it regularly? Is your emotional state calm? Do you meditate to bring yourself into harmony with God? Your body must be loved. It is your home and must be cleansed of all junk. Your body is not your enemy. You do not need to get free of your body in order to access spiritual guidance. This perfectly functioning machine called your body knows what is needed, where it is needed, and how to prioritize those needs in times of crisis. You control this marvelously complex instrument that is your home through your thoughts. The second factor that impacts your immediate field of energy is what you allow to impact your body from without. What kinds of people do you allow into your immediate space? When you allow toxic people into your immediate energy field, you will find that your feelings of well-being diminish. You must say goodbye, albeit with unconditional love, to anyone who pollutes your life space with slowed-down energy. Or you must be prepared to stave off the intrusion of lower energy people, first by recognizing it, and then neutralizing it by radiating stronger energy yourself. The problem with attempting to continually be a neutralizer is that the effort required often exhausts you, and that level of fatigue makes you susceptible to the lower energies. If someone brings anxiety, shame, depression, fear, whining, complaining, apathy, stress, worry, anger, guilt, or any of the multitude of what I call lower energy patterns, they are inviting you to join in their misery and load your life up with the problems that they live with every day. Resolve to remove yourself from any toxicity that threatens the purity of your life space. When you feel yourself being breached, take immediate action, first by recognizing what is happening, and then moving in counteraction. Consciously send out thoughts of kindness and love. Remove yourself in a conflict-free way from the invading energetic forces. Anyone who you allow to be a regular visitor in your body energy field must come with love, peace, and the higher spiritual energies. The closer you come to being in a dynamic state of grace in your thoughts and refusing to be in the fields of those who are projecting lower energy thoughts, the closer you come to being in God's mind field.
Let it chase you. Let it follow you instead of being something that you're consumed with having to get. Because the more you're attached to the outcome, the more you're trying to get something that isn't what you really want.
And this idea of knowing that divine intelligence will work in exactly the order and the preference and the time that it is supposed to. In the Course in Miracles, there's this often quoted passage that says, infinite patience produces immediate results. And it sounds like it's a contradiction, doesn't it? It sounds like a paradox. If I'm patient, infinitely patient, then I will have to wait a very long time. And this idea of attempting to hurry along the divine intelligence is something that we do with our egos all the time. Obviously, creation reveals its secrets by and by, as it is supposed to, as it is ordained. This principle of detaching ourselves from outcome, along with having infinite patience, is really essential to your manifestation process. It is inconsistent with what we have a tendency to think is the way things should be working. Because if I do everything that I'm supposed to, if I follow all of these principles and I set down all the rules and I get it all organized, then I expect that I'll have results. That's the time in our lives that I referred to earlier in the very first principle of being the warrior, going from the athlete to the warrior. That's the time in our lives when we set our goals. And there's nothing wrong with setting goals. I've written about it and talked about it on many programs right here at Nightingale Conant and in many of my books. But the idea of thinking that setting goals and then just going about and having them show up is still the thinking that keeps us sort of stuck back at the warrior phase of our development. It inhibits us from moving to higher places wherein we can begin to manage the coincidences of our lives, which sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? If it's a coincidence, you can't manage it. If you're managing it, then it's not a coincidence. But when you begin to transcend some of these paradoxes, when you reach a higher level. So setting goals is one thing, and it's something that we do in the earlier stages of our spiritual development. And we continue to do it. And these stages that I talked about earlier are not things that we go into and then never go back to. We go back, we come out of it, we go back. We're always moving in and out of these stages. The question is, what is my primary emphasis? Is my primary emphasis not only on setting goals, but in falling in love with those goals, and then insisting that those goals show up when I want them to show up? That is inconsistent with manifestation and with spirituality and higher consciousness. What you have to do is have your goals, which is what a tomato seed is. It's really a goal for tomatoes. But you have to then relax and turn your thoughts and your ideas and your consciousness and your awareness to your own purpose and know in your heart that it will manifest. You see, the key to relaxing about what it is that you would like to see manifested is the certainty of the outcome. If you have a certainty, as it says in the Course in Miracles, if you have a certainty of the outcome, patience is easy. If you are uncertain of the outcome, if you're not sure how it's going to work out, or if things are going to fall into place the way you would like them to, if you have that uncertainty, then you will not be able to be patient. So patience, infinite patience, is really like a trusting in God. And when you trust in God, you're trusting in the wisdom that created you. And when you trust in the wisdom that created you, you're trusting in yourself as well. Because you can never be separate from that wisdom. So patience and trust and awareness and higher consciousness are absolutely essential.
The idea of having a quiet mind. When I first started practicing meditating, which I encourage people to do, not from any Far Eastern guru loincloth kind of thing at all,
But as a way of understanding that there's another dimension, if I were to take you, the listener, and to put you in chains, and to put you in a dungeon, and to deny you light and human contact for the rest of your life, you would probably say to yourself, this is the end. I mean, this is the end. I can't handle this. There are some people, believe it or not, among us, who, if you were to do that very same thing, would say, this is a beginning. There's a whole world there. If any of us were forced to learn how to go into that world, we would discover many, many, many things about ourselves. And I'm talking about the world of the mind. It's not an accident that all of the great spiritual masters have encouraged a kind of meditation of one kind or another, and that most advanced people, most awakened people, practice it on a regular basis. It's not an accident. You begin to discover how slimy your mind is. The thoughts that you have all the time, and how much disasterizing we do with our minds, and how much stuff that we occupy our minds with that is so unnecessary and so silly, so foolish, so destructive, that quieting our mind and meditating really go hand in hand. Now, meditating doesn't require a lot of training. It doesn't require somebody teaching you exactly how to do it or whatever, because that defeats the purpose of meditating. When you meditate, you really want to go in there and quiet your mind. And what you want to be able to do in your life is to have an open, but not a rampage going on inside of your mind, not 1,000 thoughts barraging it. And these thoughts that you have, these are yours. These are your creation. I used to tell people as a therapist, if you don't believe that you're in control of your thoughts, then I want you to tell me who is. Then I want you to find all those people who are in control of your thoughts and send them all to me. Then I will treat them, and you will get better, which is absurd. Obviously, you're not going to get better by treating somebody else. You are the creator of thought, which means that in some metaphysical way, you're the creator of your life. Thought originates with each one of us. But most of us have trained ourselves to believe that whatever we think just sort of happened, and thoughts just sort of, I call it the pop-in theory, you know? They just sort of pop in, and I can't help it. Boop, there's a thought, and it's just there. And I can't help it. It just happened. That isn't true when you train your mind. We spend so much of our energy training ourselves in all kinds of areas. We train ourselves in business. If we're going to get a new computer system, we go out and we spend millions of dollars in a company, and we train people how to work it. And we want to become good at golf or swimming or tennis or backgammon or anything that you can think of. We know that we got to go out and we got to practice, and we got to train ourselves. We train ourselves, and we ignore our mind, which is 99% of who we are. We just completely ignore it. Like there's no training available for our minds. And we can all do that. I've really learned how to do it myself. No one ever taught me. You know, when I used to teach at university, I taught in Berlin for half a year. There was 70 students in the class. And I would have the first student introduce themselves and their name. Then I would have the second student introduce the person who was just introduced and himself. And each time I would repeat it. And I'd have the third student introduce the two that he had just introduced plus himself. And we do that for the whole class. By the time we got to the 70th student, they had to introduce everybody in the class by name, and I would then repeat each one of them. And I just had a very simple technique for doing that. It was just like concentrated effort on making my mind remember 70 people's names in an hour and a half. Now, I wasn't doing it to waste an hour and a half. This was a class on teaching people how to identify neurotic behavior in people. And it's like what I wanted to do was to teach them that they could do things with their minds, just like their patients do, that they never thought of, that they never even dreamt were possible for them. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they would have like 80, 90% recall. And by the end of the 4th or 5th week, everybody knew everybody's name in the class, and they had all trained themselves. And most people go out there and they're introduced to somebody, they say, hello, my name is Wayne. They say, what would you say your name was? They can't remember one person's name in 1 minute. And they think that, oh, I have a poor memory. But it's because they don't train. Well, the mind can be trained, and meditating is a perfect way to do that. And there's a wonderful world in there, in your mind. Quieting your mind means that you're no longer susceptible to all of the external influences that are around you. I'm always amazed when I watch the U.S. Open tennis championships that are played in New York right near LaGuardia at how the players are able to continue playing with jets going on overhead. And yet, when I am really completely involved in a tennis match, I've had people where I've played, I've had jackhammers going next to me, and my opponent is going crazy. They have to go over it, and I tell them, I don't notice it. My concentration is on the ball. And I don't hear that lawnmower going off or the jackhammer going or the airplane going on overhead. We can train ourselves to do that. The people who are really good at any game or any activity that requires concentration know how to do that. Well, we all want to be able to be better at that, and we don't want to have our minds occupied, particularly with worry and anxiety and stressful kinds of things. So you have to learn how to focus your mind, how to get focused, and keep yourself from creating those kinds of thoughts that are always impinging on your consciousness. Miracles are available there. You talk about surrendering. I meditated for a long time. It's like there would be a light. I would have this light that I would create. And it's really interesting that you can create a light with your eyes closed in a dark room. So you don't really need your eyes to create light. You need your mind to create light. Your mind can create light. And all of us do it in our dreams. We can create a color in our dream without any light. So that our minds are capable of producing that. And our minds can create smells and we can create sounds. We do all of that in our dream. And that's just a pure thought state. So what you want to do is get to that pure thought state.
I wrote some textbooks back in the early 70s talking about the importance of goals. And I can't have them all withdrawn, but I think that, I watch my kids, and some of them are in college now, and some of them are out, and they're worrying about what they're going to major in, and trying to set a goal, and I tell them just to try to just enjoy every single moment, and just let yourself be guided. I think it's great advice for parenting. It's just guide, then just step aside and recognize that all of us have the anchor of the universe located within us. That's what Lao Tzu said. It's in every single one of us. And let yourself be swept with it. Let yourself be taken by it, rather than getting your individual ego in there saying, well, this is what I'm going to do. And it's like Arthur Miller, the great playwright. He was asked a question at an interview with the New York Times. He was 91 years old, and they said to him, "Are you working on another play?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "But I probably am." And I understood exactly what he meant. I mean, I just finished writing a book that I put a year of my life into, This Wish is Fulfilled. And last night, I called the president of Hay House, my best friend, Reed Tracy, and I said, there's an idea germinating inside of me that I think will ultimately become a book. I don't know even quite, I just know it's starting to excite me. And I've often been called the father of motivation all over the world. They've got this title they put next to me, and I always say, if I have to be the father of anything other than the 8 children that I have, I would choose to be the father of inspiration, because I think it's the reverse of motivation. Motivation is when you get a hold of an idea and you take it where you believe that you can take it with your goals, and any obstacles that come along, you're going to plow through them, you're going to make this thing happen. And that's motivation. You get a hold of an idea. Inspiration is an idea gets a hold of you, and it takes you where you were intended to go even before you were ever conceived. I can't imagine you as a little boy in Germany were thinking about, being one of the most famous authors in the world. I mean, and how it all comes about, and what's going to come next for you. And like you said, I don't even know what words are going to come out next. It's for me, it's just being completely immersed in the now and surrendering, just like turning it over. That's just what I do. I turn it over. And the most amazing things happen when you turn it over. That's when God comes into your life. That's what Carl Jung called synchronicity. You have almost like a collaboration with fate. You're letting it all unfold. In the midst of your writing, I don't know if it happens for you, but there'll be something I'm not sure or whatever, and all of a sudden I'll go to the mail, or somebody will pick up the phone, and it'll be right there. And it's like, after a while, you start to almost count on it. You start to realize that you don't have to do anything. You can just let it come to you.
Yes.
So I don't think you can be totally free of goals. Like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I'm going to have a goal to go to the toilet, So I don't think I can get totally out of that goal place. But by and large in my life, I just let it be. I think the Beatles had it right. When you find yourself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will come an answer, let it be. I don't know, that's my theme.
I think there is a time in people's lives when there is a place for goals, but the important thing is the nature of the goal, and if it arises out of inspiration, as you call it, or a vision that comes to you of something that wants to be created through you. It could be a book. When the Power of Now came to me, I felt this urge suddenly of writing. I bought a yellow notepad and began writing the first line, and at that moment I knew it's a book, and I knew what it was about. And it was very different from the kind of casual writing I had done before over the years, sometimes after sitting with people in having a session, counseling sessions, doing meditation with small groups. I would sometimes say things, and then later I would write them down because that was new to me too, but I said things that I didn't know before, they came out. So that was a more casual writing, and then suddenly an energy stream came of a very different, more empowered kind of writing. And from the very first moment I knew it's a book. So in that sense, one could say I suddenly had the vision of writing a book, one could say. As one could say, I had a goal of producing a book. But it wasn't something that came as with a promise of delivering some kind of personal fulfillment to me in any way, that I can become famous through that, or I can make money through that, or I can become powerful through that, people are going to listen to me. All these could have been motivations for writing a book, but it was more like something, a realization of something that wants to come into being, and then you help it along, you go with it, you become a channel through which that wants to come into being, comes into being.
If you don't believe what goes around comes around, the next time you see somebody down, just smile at them. Just say hello and be friendly toward them. And you'll see that what you send out is what comes back. Now that law of the universe is so powerful that it affects every cell in your body. Every cell in your body. When you look at one cell in your body, ask yourself what makes the cell work. What makes a cell in your body work? Do you know what makes one individual little cell work? Harmony and cooperation. That's how cells work. An individual cell. If what's inside that cell, the electrons, the neutrons, and the protons, and all that physics stuff that's inside one, if any of them get out of whack and start not cooperating or not working in harmony, what happens to the cells around it? They're affected in some way, aren't they? When one individual cell is affected in a negative way, that is, when it loses its harmony, when it loses its cooperation, then it affects negatively those cells around it. And that's the disease, all right? And that spreads to another cell and to another cell. And before long, the harmony within you is, physiologically, is destroyed. There's two kinds of energy, supposedly, in every cell. One is the physics energy. Shirley MacLaine talks about this in her wonderful book, Out on a Limb. I recommend you read it. She talks about the physics of what is energy within one cell. And then that there's another kind of energy within a cell that scientists and physicists and chemists, none of us can figure out what it is, but it is what makes the whole thing work. They just call it the source. And that source, the nearest they can get to is love, or cooperation, or harmony, what we call love, which is just love. It's just cooperating and being in harmony with. All right? That's what love is. And that is what makes every single cell work.
And when one doesn't work right, it affects the other cells. Now, for a minute, just for a minute, think of yourself as a cell, just as one big cell, okay? Now, one of us as a cell goes out of whack, goes amok, doesn't work right in some way. Does it affect those around us? One cell gone wrong can affect all the other cells around us. It's just a growth process, seeing bigger and bigger cells. But when you think about the entire size of our universe, which is endless, which we can't even begin to comprehend what endless means, and uncaused causes and so on, then you are as big as one of those tiny little cells inside of you. And if you go amok in some way, then you affect those around you. And if our planet, which is just another cell in billions and billions and billions of other cells, if our whole planet goes amok, that is, if we store up enough weapons and we do enough killing and we have enough hate, and as a people we do that, then we will not only affect everything down to that tiny little cell, but all the cells in our planet, in our universe, and it will go on forever. See, I have taken to sending out ICUS, a copy of my parable. I send these books out to all influential people in the world in every field. Just the last 2 weeks, I think our mailing lists have totaled over 4,000 at my own expense, just signing them and sending them out to all the government leaders, all the medical leaders, all education leaders, all people in celebrity status, all people associated with different religions and so on. I'm just sending them out. All right? Now, many times when you send things out in the mail to a large mailing list, you get some back. Karma. Understanding how our universe works. In every single obstacle that you run into in your life, there's an opportunity. Every obstacle you have is a hidden opportunity. And seeing it, rather than as something to complain about or call your lawyer about or get upset about or anything in between, you see there is an opportunity in every setback you have in life, including everything you're suffering from right now. Everything, whatever it may be. There's an opportunity in it. Look for the opportunity. Look for the fulfillment, the potential for finding out what you're made out of, rather than for finding out how well you can say, see, I told you things weren't going to work out for me. So in sending out these books, I'll get 100 back. You send out 4,000, you get 100 back. That's a good day. Okay? Only 100 came back. Now, most people who send things out free and get some back say, well, this isn't working. I'm getting these back. I get 100 back and all that. To me, it's like, how can I find that person? That's a test. To me, that's a test from the universe to say, what are you made of? You're just going to give up and not find that person? Or are you going to go look for that person? Because that's to find out what you're made out of. And that's what I do with all of that and have always done. And somehow just knew to do that. When it's somebody says no, it's how can I figure out a way to go around that no? Rather than I think that they're right, I'll just give up. It's always how can I get around that?
Quote from A Course in Miracles. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. For a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you, for you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. It's about remembering our origination. I committed this passage to memory many years ago, and I use it as a way to remember who I truly am and where I really came from, particularly when I communicate with my Creator, to stay on purpose and in spirit. Now I'd like to go through each of the messages in this observation from A Course in Miracles one by one. Number 1, the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. We came from a quiet, peaceful place. That's the very essence of creation. So when our mind is filled with noisy dialogue, we shut out the possibility of remembering our spirit. Incessant chatter keeps us attached to the physical world and produces anxiety, stress, fear, worry, and so many of the emotional reactions that are decidedly removed from God realization. We must minimize distractions when we wish to communicate with God. So being in nature, away from the artificial noises that invade our space, is helpful. But the most important thing to consider is how to keep our mind free from the dizzying, bewildering cascade of thoughts flowing through our head from morning till night, and even on into our dream state. It's been estimated that we have something like 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The real problem is that we have the same 60,000 thoughts today that we had yesterday. I've made the practice of meditation a part of my daily life because it's one way to quiet the mind so that the memory of God is accessible. So by learning to meditate, or at the very least shutting down the inner dialogue produced, directed, and acted upon by your ego, you can open up a space for remembering and returning to spirit. 2. It cannot come where there is conflict. In order for conflict to exist, there must be two opposing forces at work. That is, one force, in the form of an idea, a point of view, a desire, or a contribution, directly clashes with another. Conflict defines our lives in many ways, as we oppose our partners, our children, our bosses, our neighbors, and even our countries. In politics, it's always one party versus the other, and the entertainment industry portrays battling points of view that are usually turned into violent scenes. Essentially, conflict requires two-ness. However, remembering where we came from involves our returning to the oneness of being in spirit. After all, there are no battling powers in the divine realm of spirit. There's only perfect oneness, and this is what we want to rejoin. We want to become one again with our Creator, and we can't retrieve this memory of God with a mind in conflict in any way. 3. For a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. The second part of this teaching from A Course in Miracles reinforces that a combative mind cannot remember where it once resided in eternal gentleness. Obviously, you can't wage war and simultaneously focus on peace and gentleness, and it is eternal gentleness that you want to remember and rejoin. It's really quite simple to do this. Just close down the battlefield and surrender. Remove all of the artillery, send the soldiers home, and replace the instruments of war in your mind with thoughts of peace, tranquility, and surrender. Making your mind a place of peace is achieved by your own will, so steadfastly refusing to have thoughts of conflict allows you to activate the glory of remembering your spirit. 4. The fourth part of this quote. What you remember is a part of you. Every memory I have is me. What a glorious feeling it is to know this. We each have the power to retrieve any piece of ourselves that we desire and to experience it right here, right now, in this present moment. The great Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once observed that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. In other words, if we can't go back and remember the spiritual bliss that defined us before the beginning, we've really abandoned a part of ourselves. As we move into communion with God, we must know that our inability to remember our spiritual origins is another way of really saying, quote, I'm unable to know myself because I have no recollection or memory of my spirit, unquote. In fact, the corollary of this line from A Course in Miracles that we're processing right now would be, what you don't remember is not a part of you. In other words, if we fail to remember spirit, then obviously it isn't a part of us. And 5, for you must be as God created you. As you communicate with your source of being, know that you're awakening a part of yourself that's just like God. In fact, you ought to try to approach communication with God by being as closely aligned to the way that you were created as possible. That is, by becoming a vibrational match to the all-loving Creator. Come to the quiet moments in consultation with God in love, in peace, and without judgment. As A Course in Miracles is saying, you must be as you were created. So why put on a false mask and pretend to be anything or anyone else? In this way, you can open the channel of communication because you finally remembered to be the way you were created. And that's the key to effective prayer. And as Gandhi once said, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it's the most potent instrument of action. And 6, let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God still shining in your quiet mind. Let's take the 3 suggestions in this teaching one at a time. First, A Course says, let this madness be undone. The madness here is that of living in a state of conflict. In other words, we must make an attempt to transcend the dichotomies of our life because the division creates so much suffering and keeps us from living an inspired life. I remember a Ram Dass lecture in which he said, I firmly come to the conclusion that there are no thems for me anymore. I can't be told who to hate, who to fight, who to subdue. I only see an us in my heart. All those messages to divvy up our world are insane. All our self-centeredness just drives our ego's insatiable appetite for making us special and putting other people down. The Course encourages us to be done with this madness once and for all, both in our minds and in our actions. And second, we're told to turn in peace to the remembrance of God. Once again, we know in our heart that we came from a place of peace. So any discord can't be the result of our Creator's actions. God cannot come to us when we pray from non-peace, so the solution is to return to the remembrance of Him and ask to be made an instrument of His peace. When I find myself out of sorts, I remember. And what I remember is to turn to peace right now in prayer. I become peace rather than anguish, and I feel the calmness I long for come over me like a wave of pleasurable relief.
What goes around truly does come around. The more you give away and do everything that you do in the service of others, the more that seems to come back. The cycle of real magic takes root. This lesson of prosperity applies to all fields of endeavor. When I was boarding an airplane early one time, I overheard the sarcastic voice of a flight attendant saying, "Here come the animals." I knew it was only a matter of time until that organization perished from a scarcity of passengers. Sure enough, they've gone into bankruptcy. Employees need to know in their souls that they are privileged to serve those who are willing to give of their income to use the service. But I'm not talking to an organization, I'm talking to you. You can shift your consciousness all you want, but you must also shift the emphasis of what you do from results to purpose. Try it. Shift for a 1-month period of time and see if miracles don't start showing up in your life. The less you need to force this new way of being on yourself, the easier it becomes to let it be the guiding principle of your life. It is about allowing your natural self to flow peacefully and knowing your bliss comes from giving and not getting. Letting yourself just flow is a concept you will want to become quite familiar with as you begin to allow the prosperity that you desire in your life. Earlier in this tape, I discussed how everything seems to work perfectly in our lives when we are inspired. Flow is that kind of an inspiration, one so powerful that all obstacles seem to be removed, and we are in love with what we are doing so much that it seems to just flow without any effort from us at all. Getting to flow in your life means achieving a state of concentration so total that everything else becomes non-existent. People who experience prosperity in their lives know how to achieve this magnificent state, wherein their activities, instead of being a tedious set of chores to finish, become more like a meditation, only they are active and involved rather than sitting quietly. Getting to this zone, you are literally watching your body do things that are incredible. You are experiencing magnificent joy or bliss, and nothing can get in your way. You are on purpose, and you are having that peak experience that others can only dream about. There is a way to get to this state of flow. These are not only the secrets to becoming a superachiever in the workplace, they are the secrets for producing genuine miracles in your life. This process includes 1. Having an overriding spiritual goal that gives meaning to your work. Making your work a meditative experience, and instead of seeing yourself as doing a particular task, you actually in your mind become the task. You shift from a human doing to a human being, if you will. There is no separation. You and the task are unified, all in the name of that overriding spiritual objective to give of yourself in a purposeful way. 2. Focus and close your mind to all distractions. You can train your mind to focus, and this is why I've been encouraging you to learn to meditate. Give your mind the same mental training that you give your body when you want your body to be in maximum physical condition. You need not be a slave to your senses. Focusing is your natural knowing within. You can either ignore it or go there often. 3. Surrender to the process. You must resist your impulse to strive for what you want. Surrender to God or your higher power, or however you choose to spell it. You must let go and surrender to the actual process. Forget about the result and put your mind and your physical body totally into the experience at hand. This is not that difficult to achieve. Don't strain to achieve. Instead, enjoy the process of the work that you are doing. The results will come independent of your striving for them. 4. Experience the ecstasy. This is the automatic result that will flow to you from the above guidelines. You will know a kind of inner beatitude and bliss that will be unmistakable. It will sneak up on you and hit you over the head, so to speak, but nevertheless, you will know that glorious emotional peak experience if you get yourself to flow in your life. The ecstasy is its own miracle. 5. Watch as you see yourself reaching peak productivity without striving. Your state of ecstasy opens up new vistas of creativity and energy. This natural state of bliss is the key to improving your performance. This is the state that superachievers are able to create for themselves. The processes of surrendering, focusing, and living at purpose lead to ecstasy. When you feel that inner bliss, you simply want more and more of it. The more of it that you are able to create for yourself, the more productive you become. Your thoughts create all of this ecstasy, and ultimately all of the miracles that are going to come into your life in the form of increased prosperity. Your mind is very powerful in terms of what it can produce in your physical reality, as well as the physical reality beyond your own borders. You are now on a path of working toward reversing scarcity consciousness to one of prosperity. This is largely a mental game. You must convince yourself that you and only you are responsible for the pictures in your mind. You must know how very powerful your picturing process is in creating the material world that you experience. This is a universal principle. This is a vital, alive factor of the universe that you are a part of and that is also a part of you. What you can conceive of as a picture in your mind, you can create in the physical world, provided you do not let go of the picture. My wife Marcy and I are currently having our children take lessons from acknowledged masters in the art of meditating and learning to trust one's inner vision. We do this not to give them an advantage over others, but for the purpose of their knowing that they have something within them that no one can ever take away from them, regardless of the material circumstances of their lives. They are learning very early that their peace and tranquility as human beings is dependent upon themselves, and that they have a special retreat within that is always available to them. The greatest understanding you can have is that you don't understand. And spending your life and your energy and your relationships on trying to always be understood and have someone else agree with you and understand you is one sure way to make sure that you're going to be a victim for the duration of that relationship. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to allow yourself to be in a position where someone else is demanding to be understood by you. There's some things that are very simple, some very simple little clues that I use in my own life and in pulling your own strings that I'd like to share here with you. Under the heading of being quietly effective and knowing you're never going to be understood. First is that shrugging is a virtue. If you could just learn the art of the shrug. I like Ayn Rand's title, Atlas Shrugged. Atlas holding up the whole world and just shrugs. And the whole idea of not having to be in a position to defend yourself or to be understood, or somebody's demanding something from you, and where you could just sort of shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't understand. I just don't understand, and that's okay. My wife and I do this to each other all the time. I mean, she does the craziest things in the world. And vice versa. I mean, she thinks what I do is crazy, too. I mean, she believes in what she's doing and believes that that's the way a house has to be run, for example. She makes the beds first thing in the morning. I mean, that to her is just her way. I have lived under the philosophy that it's not any healthier psychologically to get into a made bed than it is to get into an unmade bed. But she makes the bed. I don't understand somebody getting out of bed in the morning and making the bed, but I don't have to understand. It's not necessary for me to understand. I don't have to get into a you're wrong and I'm right attitude toward it. It's just a simple shrug. If you want to make the bed, that's terrific. I'll even help you if you want to. Just let it go. You don't have to. I don't have to understand that. And you know something? Life is full of those little things. Everywhere you go, you're going to encounter people who do things their own way. And that's really what makes the world go round, that uniqueness, that specialness in people. So if you just shrug at it and stop telling yourself that I have to be right, and I have to make somebody else wrong in all of my interactions with them, just shrug. Just shrug quietly, shrug your shoulders and say, they have a right. They're on their own path. They have a right to do what they want to do. And you don't have to be understood. And when you get into that mindset of not needing to be understood all the time, then you're not going to be explaining yourself and having somebody else explain themselves to you over and over again endlessly. Being offended is a choice to be a victim. You ever think how silly it is to go around being offended? There are people who turn on the radio and they hear somebody speaking in a certain tone or saying a word that they don't like, and they have a whole vocabulary of words that they're offended by. And if somebody says one of them, right away they go off into a dither. Well, it's just like letting somebody else's behavior
decide how you're going to be emotionally. I mean, you can be the kind of person who goes down the street and your emotions are being pulled by everybody else, your strings are being yanked by everybody else in the street, depending on what words they choose, what symbols come out of their mouth. This person says hell, that one says damn, this one says uh-oh, this one says caca, that one says poo-poo, this one says wee-wee, whatever it may be, and you're offended, or whatever synonyms you want to use for all of those functions. For what? It's like allowing yourself the right to process somebody else's behavior for what it is. It's their behavior. It's not yours. If you don't like what somebody is saying on the radio, tune the dial someplace else. If you don't like the way somebody else is dressing, turn your eyes someplace else. Don't feast your eyes on it. If someone else wants to hear rock music that you think is disgusting, then don't listen to it. That's what this whole thing is about. That's what the First Amendment to the Constitution is about. That's what free speech is about. That's what free expression of as a human being is about. That there's no code that is going to fit everyone. And choosing not to be offended is to choose not to be a victim. People speak the way they speak. I don't like some of the language that I see in the films. I don't let my children go and see some of the film. I don't like the violence that is on the screen. Rather than being offended by it and being all upset about it and getting myself worked up and being a victim to the people who choose to display violence on the screens, I simply don't go to those movies. I don't have anything to do with them. And I don't miss them, and I happen to believe that it's part of the gratuitous violence that we find throughout the culture. But I'm doing what I can to eliminate that. But being offended by it, being upset by it, it's as silly as being offended by starvation. Starvation is a part of what the universe is about. And so is my desire to change it and to improve it. That's just as important. And that's what I go with. I go with what I'm for rather than what I'm against. Everything that you're against weakens you. Everything that you're for empowers you. So the question is, do you want to be empowered or do you want to be weakened? Everything you fight, you'll be weaker for the effort. Everything that you're for will empower you. When they asked Mother Teresa if she would march against the war in Vietnam in 1967, she said, no, I won't. She said, but if you have a march for peace, I'll be there.